So healthcare, we know, is a major industry here on the First Coast. And this week, we're taking a look at some of the biggest medical breakthroughs happening in Northeast Florida. We begin at the Mayo Clinic, where new technology is changing the approach to stroke, bringing care to you when minutes matter.
What looks like a typical ambulance on the outside houses life-saving technology on the inside.
How often do you see stroke victims?
Every day.
As a shift manager with Century Ambulance and a paramedic for 10 years, Ron Ferreira knows strokes claim multiple victims.
It can break their families financially, spiritually, psychologically. It's very, very difficult.
Stroke is extremely common.
Dr. David Freeman, a professor of neurology and neurosurgery at Mayo Clinic, says about 800,000 people in the United States have a stroke each year. Those people could have better outcomes thanks to the new Mobile Telestroke Program with Mayo Clinic and Century Ambulance.
1, 2, 3, 4. This technology basically allows the doctor to beam into the ambulance and see the patient before they ever arrive at the hospital.
The doctor performs a stroke evaluation to get a better idea of what they need or don't need when a patient arrives at the hospital.
We're eliminating a step that would have to take place in the hospital by doing it on the truck, in transit.
That means saving critical time, about 7.5 minutes to be exact, during the program's pilot.
Those 7.5 minutes can make a difference between someone being in a bedbound state versus walking out of the hospital.
It will change a lot of lives. I'm confident of that.
Juliette Dreyer, First Coast News, on your side.